Hi, Mr. DAPS, and I'm here with Ed, who works with the Walt Disney Archives. And Ed, could you tell us what you do a little bit first, and then how you're involved with this project in particular?
Well, in the Walt Disney Archives, I am in the research department. So anytime somebody has a question about the history of Disney, they come to me and our department and ask us to delve into our collection to find the answers that you can't find in other places other than the Walt Disney Archives. And I became involved with this project because for some reason they consider me the Walt guy in the archives. So of course
that's not a bad distinction to have.
It's not. So you know, this is Walt's plane. Yeah. So they said, hey Ed, we're going to do an exhibit about the plane. We need you to do some research on the plane. Mm-hmm. So I was excited to do it, and I jumped into first Walt's correspondence collection. There's a lot of clues in there about Walt's passion for flying and the Gulf Stream. So I just went from there, and just little by little it started adding up, and I was just like, there's this whole interesting history about Walt's plane, and we're displaying it here today.
Which is very cool. So you start doing the research. How far back, like how long of a process has this been?
I've been doing this probably about 2 years.
Wow.
Looking into it, and it's a very time-consuming project because it's not something that we can go onto the computer and look for the answer.
Right.
You have to think, well, what was happening at the time period? Let's go. My always go-to is Walt's correspondence.
Okay.
Walt's correspondence we have goes back to the 20s to 1966. Wow. So a lot of times what you do is you'll think, okay, he was buying this plane at this time, and I'll go to a correspondence, find a letter that he was writing to somebody, and a lot of times Walt would talk about personal things.
Okay.
So he said, we just bought the Gulfstream and we're flying it, it's great. And I'm like, there you go. So you can start piecing these things together to find out, you know, not only that he was buying one, but how he felt about it. And he really loved the plane because it was a way for him to get away to work. Primarily it was a business tool, but he also loved it because he used it to take his children and grandchildren around the United States.
An element of freedom, I suppose.
Element of freedom.
So do you know how they chose this particular plane?
They chose it based on his personal pilot, Chuck Malone, who was hired in '62, was with Walt, and they were flying to LaGuardia. And they got off, and they had a smaller plane. And people were making comments that Walt Disney should be in something bigger than this little, you know, Queen Air. So he said, you know what, we're done with this, let's get a real plane. So they looked into it and researched it, and a few companies had approached Walt about, buy my plane, buy my plane. But the primary concern with them was, you know, long haul trips. Their other plane was just for the short haul West Coast.
Sure.
So they looked into it and they researched it and they came up with this Gulfstream. Gulfstream was probably the most popular and safest plane built at that time period for business use. And it was designed specifically for business users. You bought the plane. Inside was devoid of anything but the basic avionics.
That makes sense.
And then you would design what you wanted inside, and then they would put it in there for you, and then it was your plane. No, the two planes were the same.
Well, and this plane in particular had a few modifications that were specific to the Disneys.
Right.
Could you talk a little bit about those?
Sure. Well, if you're talking about the interior of the plane,
yes.
The interior was Walt and Lillian. They had a hand in it, and it's that color scheme that they liked. And then also the dividers in the plane. Everything in there was thought about what is going to make our trip comfortable. So they got the nice couches, the comfortable chair that's here, and they just said, you know, this is what we want. And the company, Pacific Air Motive in Burbank, where the plane was based, went in and designed everything for them. And what's interesting is the plane after that, the King Air, if you look at the paint scheme and the interior, they kind of matched it. And that was intentional. They wanted it to look the same. So.
And there's some fun gadgets for Walt in this too, is that correct?
Gadgets as in
so he could see where the plane perhaps was at.
Definitely. So Walt being Walt, you know, he kind of went away from commercial aviation because, you know, Walt, control. You have to have control. So when you're relying on commercial aviation, you have to go by their schedule. You know, it's limited. Walt wanted the freedom. So when he was in the plane, he needed to know the altitude, you know, the airspeed. There was a phone by his desk so he can call the pilot and say what's going on, or, you know, kind of veer this way. So it was definitely set up for him to be in control when he wasn't in control.
Which is awesome. And you have some of that stuff here, which was really cool to see. Correct. Do you happen to know how much Walt got to fly in this plane?
He flew, I don't know the exact number, but he did fly quite a bit in the plane. Especially toward the end of his life, he flew in it quite a bit. Especially, you know, they were playing in Walt Disney World, the New York World's Fair. They were going back and forth constantly. Like I said, Grumman Gulfstream was made for the long haul trips. He went to Mexico City, Guadalajara, he went to Canada.
Wow.
So he was in it quite a bit, and he loved it so much that it was about a year, 4 months after he got this plane, he already ordered the G2.
Wow.
And it's like, Walt, you barely got this plane. And he's like, we've ordered the next
Get
one.
another one.
Yeah, he says, we're ordering
got
this
the
one.
itch.
It's going to get here in 68. Unfortunately, he passed away in 66, and they canceled that order.
That makes sense.
You know, Walt loved flying, and it goes back to his early days as a child, and he learned through, you know, aviation, and he said, he was intrigued by it.
Yeah.
And he went up in the air when he was in Paris, and he said he was hooked.
Yeah.
So when he was able to buy a plane, he bought a plane. And Walt being Walt, I want a faster one, I want a better one, and that's how it went his whole life.
So last question, do you have a favorite part of this process, or maybe something in this display that really stands out to you?
I like the pilot log that we have, and
Okay.
that is on loan from Mark Malone, who is Chuck Malone, his son.
Oh, cool.
And it basically chronicles the early days of Disney aviation.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
he even wrote in there like Walt Disney's first charter. He was so excited to take Walt up in the air, and he wrote it down. So you're able to go through this logbook and see the trips they took,
Oh,
who
that's
went
very
with them,
cool.
and anything historical that happened on the thing. And even when he went to pick up this plane when it was new, he put "new airplane!" exclamation point, and it's over there on display. And it just, you could see the enthusiasm that he had.
Oh, that's cool.
Flying this plane, and that's why I like that as a researcher,
Oh,
to be able to
totally.
look back and see these.
And I'm sure you got to read through the whole thing, and
I read
that's
the
a story in itself.
It is a total story,
How
and
cool.
we hope to expand on this story later on. This is a smaller display, but hopefully we can expand on
That would be amazing, because what I'm seeing here is incredible. But
Oh,
thank you so much for your
Oh,
time,
thank
Ed,
you.
and thank you for this display.
Sure. Nice.